All right, and I'd like to welcome everyone once more to the informational webinar on the call for proposals for OLC Accelerate 2019. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the mic over to our moderator for today's webinar, Dorothy Lofton, who is an instructional designer at Oregon State University, as well as the chair of presenter services for Accelerate 2019. So the floor is all yours, Dorothy.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. So I'll welcome you all again to the Call for Proposals information webinar. This is being offered as part of the Presenter Services suite of resources, which provides free resources for enhancing your presentations. Presenter Services, the primary goal is to enhance the quality of conference activities by supporting presenters in the creation of session abstracts and descriptions, slide design, engagement strategies, and overall delivery of the presentations. Basically, we're here to help you in all stages of a conference presentation, from proposal to delivery. As was mentioned, I'm Dorothy. I'm an instructional designer at Oregon State University and the Presenter Services Chair for this conference. With us today, we have a great panel. We have Christine Hinckley, who's a Senior Director of Conferences and Events for OLC, Tracy Koster, Associate Director of Online Learning at the University of New Hampshire and the conference co-chair, Doug Geyer, the Director of E-Learning at Golden Gate University and is a program co-chair, Megan Kohler, Learning Designer at the Dutton E-Learning Institute at Penn State University, who's the other program co-chair, and last but not least, Katie Fife-Schuster, the Director of Conferences and Events for OLC. So the goal of the webinar today is to provide the community with insight into OLC's proposal evaluation process. Now I'm going to turn it over to Christine Hinckley to talk to you about the conference this year.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here today. Before I get started, I also just want to do a shout out to Dorothy, Tracy, Doug, Megan, everybody who's involved with planning the conference, the presenter services and program team that works with you all on your sessions and is presenting this webinar today is 100% volunteer team, and I can tell you that they put thousands of hours in putting the conference together. So you're in very good hands as far as help with your proposals, and I wish you all the best of luck submitting proposals and being accepted for the conference. I wanted to point out that Accelerating Online Learning Worldwide, the next 25 years is our theme this year. And the theme is there because this is actually the 25th anniversary of this conference, the fall conference, which has traditionally always been in Orlando. And so we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. We have a lot of fun activities planned. There's a lot of interactivity at this conference. Things from talkabouts where we have conversations and you meet other people, networking breaks, different events going on. There are a lot of things going on at this conference that allow you to network with many different people. So we look forward to welcoming you in Orlando this fall. The conference will be held at the Walt Disney World Swan and Dolphin in Orlando. It is November 19th through 22nd, which is the Tuesday through Friday, the week prior to Thanksgiving. And we encourage you all to follow us at OLC Today on social media and to use the hashtag OLC Accelerate when conversing about the conference itself. The call for proposals is open now, so we are very happy that you're here and interested in learning a little more how to do this and the best practices behind submitting a proposal. You can see that it's open through, we always put 11:59 p.m. Eastern time, so there's no confusion about when the system closes down, through May 22nd, 2019. And the program committee is seeking proposals, as you can see here, that reflect and showcase a community of practice. So theory, research methodology, applied effective practices, all welcome. There's both research and evidence-based proposals are encouraged for submission. If you have any questions, certainly you can email us at conference@onlinelearning-c.org, and the program chairs and the presenter services, and I'm sure more information on their contact will be forthcoming. So I'm going to turn this over now to Tracy Koster, I believe, our conference co-chair.
Hi, thank you so much, Christine. Appreciate that. Hi, everybody. This is Tracy Koster, the co-chair of Accelerate 19. I am so excited that there are over almost 150 of you on this call today. That is really going to help us have some fantastic high-quality proposals to consider so that we can have some great opportunities for you all to gain knowledge and share knowledge. But before you go and start that submission, I know everybody is here to find out what do I do to make sure I get to go and I get to share that knowledge. So we've come up with a 4-step kind of process to success. And we're going to start, I'll give you a high-level overview of that now to get and help ensure that your proposal gets that kind of glance and that look over. You're going to want to, 1, determine the fit, 2, review the track descriptions, 3, review the session types, and finally, review the rubric. So now we're going to go ahead and dig a little bit deeper into what that exactly means. So how do you determine your fit? Well, first of all, what you'll want to do is actually read the call for proposals. Now, reading the CFP sounds really simple, but actually skipping this step could be one of the reasons that your proposal doesn't actually get selected. We all are professionals in this space, and we've probably submitted proposals and research projects and things of that nature several times. And so sometimes it's really easy to just jump right in and start submitting things, or maybe you've submitted a proposal and presented it someplace else and you think it would also tie in here. There's a tendency to just kind of copy and paste the old proposal and put it into the OLC proposal. But one of the things I like to always remember, I don't know if any of you had this experience, but I know in elementary school, it was 5th grade with Mr. Kelly, we were given a piece of paper and it had a whole bunch of items on it. And he said we needed to read the directions and finish the paper and bring it up to him. And of course, me, because I was an overachiever, I did not read the directions and I wanted to be the first one up to give Mr. Kelly my paper. And I sped through everything. And when I got to the very last question and went to walk up to him, I realized nobody else was doing it. And he said, "Did you read the directions?" And I looked at it and it said, "Do not answer any of these questions and stay seated at your desk." So, that's one of the things that I always kind of reflect on when I'm thinking about these things. So as you go and move forward with this process, make sure that you read and review each of the items that are being put out there before you. We also review our criteria at OLC every year, and the committees review their criteria just to make sure that we're still in line with what is the latest and greatest in terms of insights and topics. So that will change periodically from year to year. So even if you've done it before, it's always a good thing to look at that and read that again. And then as you see up on this slide, we've got some helpful hints, and it's pretty interesting because it's exactly what Christine just highlighted when she was reading through that call for proposal page. On here, you can see that it has that we're going to reflect and showcase our vibrant community of practice. And you want to promote that theory, research, methodology, and effective practices. Some of the other things that you can really see on here that is also on the OLC website. It tells you to make sure you read through the information, that you align your submission to the session type, that you pay close attention to the selection criteria, you review the track descriptions, and there is a great submission checklist that is also on the Online Learning Consortium's website that will allow you to kind of do that double check right before you hit that submit button. So reading through that, that call for proposals or call for presentations is really important. It's also important that you make sure that you understand the theme and the focus. As Christine already mentioned, this is our 25th anniversary. And we're also really looking forward to the next 25 years. So as you're considering what and how you might want to frame some of your proposals and or some of the presentations, it might be interesting to think about a historical look at it and a future forward look at the topic, or seeing how something may have shifted or changed over time. Certainly isn't necessarily a hard, fast requirement, but those are some of the ways that you can find that you can creatively incorporate the theme into your proposal. And then finally, you want to make sure you're considering your audience. OLC is our annual conference, and this annual conference, Accelerate is our annual conference, and it draws from across the globe, a variety of institutional types and industry verticals, and a whole range of professionals, all the way from entry-level staff to university presidents and the like. We have a multitude and a large number of opportunities for you to get engaged. And so as you're determining what the audience is for your proposal, I encourage people to be as specific and as disciplined as possible in this. That doesn't mean that you have to limit your audience. If your audience has broad appeal, then make sure that it really does have broad appeal and put that on there. But making sure that you are selective about who is the intended person rather than just selecting anyone and everyone it will benefit not only you in that you'll actually be able to share your knowledge with the individuals who are best aligned to receive that knowledge and do something with that knowledge, but it'll also help you to make sure that the right people are in that room and they won't be frustrated that they showed up to a session that really wasn't relevant to them. So it really winds up being a win-win on both sides. So that completes the first step of establishing your fit on our 4 steps to a successful proposal process. So now I'm going to turn it over to Doug, who's going to talk about step 2, reviewing the track descriptions.
Thank you, Tracy. And yes, I am going to speak about track descriptions, which we've already discussed a little bit. And as program chair, I've also been involved with this conference for a number of years as a presenter, and I've also reviewed proposals and has also served as a chair of the content tracks. And so hopefully, what we provide you today and also my discussion about the tracks and the track descriptions will be a benefit to you. So this is the second step, reviewing the track descriptions. And before you submit your proposal, it's really important to review the track descriptions to ensure the best alignment between your proposal and the particular track that you're submitting to. And so in the next few slides, we'll discuss where you can find these track descriptions and the associated keywords to help you identify the right track for your proposal. One very important note is that, and I think it's been mentioned before, even if you previously submitted a proposal to the OLC Accelerate conference in the past, it's critically important to review the track descriptions from year to year because they're updated every year and to reflect current themes and also feedback and trends that we see emerging. So it's really important to always pay attention to what we are offering this year and to make sure that it all aligns. So this is a screenshot of the website where you can find the track descriptions listed. You can expand any of those menu items defined of those track names, and you'll find complete descriptions. The descriptions include an overview of the track and then also some of the possible areas for exploration and emphasis. And these are just examples, but hopefully it will give you some idea of what the track is all about. They're not exhaustive, but they are representative of some of the themes and topics. And then along with these track descriptions, you'll also see the keywords listed. There are keywords for each track that also help guide you in aligning your proposal with the appropriate category. So during the proposal submission process, you'll be asked to identify the top 3 to 5 keywords that most accurately represent your presentation. So not only do they help guide you in aligning your proposal with the appropriate category, we also use, and when I say we, the people who are programming the conference use those keywords to help identify, what proposals are aligning with which themes. And then also we use this data to, and it's evaluated in helping the conference committee identify those trends and themes. And then for future conferences, this data is also used to help us calibrate and refine the tracks and track descriptions for future conferences. And so the track descriptions you see up there today, we've done some refinement based on data that we've received in the past. And that leads me to my next slide. I wanted to briefly discuss a couple of changes from 2018. We have updated all of our tracks with keywords and did some refinements, but in particular, there are 2 where we've had the most refinement. And one of them is the tools and technologies track. So we've refocused this track this year to explore the application of tools and technologies in online learning. Submissions may include sharing of original ideas or approaches to technology use, and this includes a specific focus on tools and technology, new media, and innovative learning environments. Some possible areas that you might investigate in this particular track emphasize the exploration of technologies for increasing student engagement, tools that support the teaching and learning process and improve learning effectiveness, and also emerging technological trends that hold a significant potential to impact learning. And then we have also updated the teaching and learning effectiveness track. In 2018, this was actually called the learning effectiveness track. And so we've combined teaching and learning together. And this one, and to be distinguished from the tools and technology track, is really discussing and emphasizing more of the evidence-based practices rather than tools. So the practices and strategies that improve the teaching and learning. So for example, effective theories, models, and methods to help guide students and support their success. And just a couple of examples here, and there's more on the website of areas that you might investigate are instructional design theories and models that support teaching and learning, rigorous design cases that offer rich representation of knowledge and practice, and the application or creation of best practices of synchronous and asynchronous environments. So with that, I think, Megan, I'm going to hand it off to you to discuss step 3.
Thanks, Doug. Hi, everyone. I am so excited to talk to you today about session types. Now, session types are important, just as the other steps are that we've discussed today, but I'm going to talk to you specifically about why it's important to identify the correct session type as you're drafting your proposal. And also, this is another element that is updated annually, so we're going to talk about updates here and also why it's important to pay attention to those. So, with session types, they're essentially the format of your presentation or your proposal, depending on the phase that you're in. Now, this is actually a really important classification mechanism used for the Accelerate conference. And there's a number of people that this ends up impacting. First of all, you, when you're working on submitting your proposal or drafting your proposal. It impacts the work that the review committee does, as well as the planning committee, and ultimately the attendees of the conference. So let's take a closer look at this. Now, why are these session descriptions important to you? Well, because as you're working on drafting a proposal, these serve as your target. These identify the exact criteria that we are looking for when we review the proposal. So let me give you an example of how this might or may not work out in a person's favor. Let's say that I'm going to create a proposal for a workshop, and I work very carefully on drafting a great proposal, and I hit on all the different points, except I don't have a plan for interactivity in my proposal. I think we can all agree that a good workshop would probably be something that's highly interactive. And so if I go ahead and I submit my proposal, what kind of a score do you think I'm going to get if I don't mention anything about interactivity in a session that's supposed to be highly interactive? Well, probably not a very high score. So that's an example of why it's important for you to make sure that you are aligned with the session description. The next group of people that this impacts is the review committee. Who are they? Well, as Christine mentioned previously, they are a group of volunteers. We have about 150 volunteers who participate in the review process, and they review around 1,000 proposals every year for this conference. And that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of proposals to read through. And so these descriptions serve as a checklist. And it's the only way that we can really ensure that all of the proposals are reviewed objectively and fairly, because this sort of helps tie into that rubric that we use. And so when the reviewers are reviewing the proposals, this information guides them and helps them decide which proposals should get accepted and which ones may not quite make the cut. Next up, we have the planning committee. Well, who's the planning committee? Well, it's individuals like Doug, Tracy, myself, the chairs and co-chairs, and we are also volunteers, and we collaborate with OLC to design the program. And I can give you a firsthand testimonial in terms of the amount of information that we sift through in order to plan the program for you. And I can tell you, Katie and Christine, they care so much about creating a high quality program for you. We really sift through all of the details of the feedback that is provided, both from the previous Accelerate conference and from the Innovate conference that just happened here in the spring. And we really want to make this a great experience for anyone who attends the conference. And so this information, these session types, also help us define a balanced program. We want to make sure that we have representation from all of the different session types that are submitted. And Katie's actually going to talk to us a little bit more about that later on in the presentation today. And lastly, the attendees. I'm sure you've all been to a conference before. You've all been through the process where you look through the program and try to identify which session is going to be right for you. Well, sometimes that comes in the form of a workshop or a discovery session. And so understanding sort of what you're committing to as an attendee can be really helpful when you're looking at planning your day. Updates. This, as you've heard, the session descriptions or the session types are a key feature that it's a thread throughout the entire conference from beginning to end. And so it's really important for us to make sure that we are aligning those session descriptions with the most relevant and up-to-date information based on what you, the conference attendees, and the community want to learn about. And so, like I said, we want you to have the greatest experience, and the best way that we can do that is by paying attention and going in and making these small tweaks that help better align the session descriptions with what the community wants to see. And so as Doug mentioned, even if you think that you know them, I would encourage you to go out and take another look at them. We have made a lot of updates for 2019, and I'm going to talk about those right now. So for 2019, we have an adjustment to our education session. If you're familiar with the structure that has occurred in 2018 and previously, there had been education sessions and panel sessions. Well, in looking at the program this year, we've actually decided that the goals of the education sessions and the panel sessions are actually really similar. And so what we've decided to do is combine those two into the sort of umbrella term of education sessions. Now, what that has done is that has left us with an opening for a brand new format, gamified sessions. And this is something that we're really excited about. Last year, Doug and I experimented with this format, and it was so much fun. We actually had the highest attended session in our session type, highest number of attendees. The feedback was incredible. I bumped into people several months after the conference, and people were still coming up to me afterwards, and they were just like, "Your session was amazing. I learned so much from your session." And so this is something that we're really excited to include this year. It's going to be highly interactive, and we have some experts in gamification that are working really hard to develop some resources, materials for you that if you're not quite familiar with how to get started with offering a gamified session or gamified presentation, we're going to have resources available to support you with that. And you can follow up in, I believe, just a few weeks with the presenter services webpage. We should have those up and available for you. And Dorothy is the lead on that, and I know that she'll do a great job at making sure that those are high quality for all of you. The last thing I'm going to talk to you about are the key features that we have available. So if you have looked at the information on the website previously, it was simply a few paragraphs of information. What we've done this year is we've added these key features which sort of give you an at-a-glance view in terms of what the highlights are that we're really looking for, what the key criteria are that we want to see with each of these types of sessions. So here you can see with an express workshop, we've got things like it's 45 minutes total. We've got 1 to 3 presenters. The presentation style is similar to an exploration or a try-it-yourself format. The interactivity is high. So as you can see from this example, it's just supposed to provide you with a very simple, easy view to glean the information that you need when you're drafting your proposal. And now I'm going to hand things back over to Tracy.
So now you've done the first 3 steps and you're ready to do number 4, and that is review the rubric. This is actually, we're going to kind of share with you now, is the elements that are reviewed by the review team and what they're looking for in each of those phases when they're determining the rankings and or ratings of the proposals that are submitted. You can find some information in regards to this on the Online Learning Consortium's website. It is part of the lower, scroll down on the call for proposals, you will see some of this information detailed out there as well. But there are several criteria that we look for. The first being clarity. So does the title match the abstract? Is it clearly relevant to what is going on in regards to the content that is being shared? You'd be surprised, but there are several times where I'll read a title of something as a reviewer and I'm getting really excited because it sounds amazing. And then when I read the content, it doesn't really seem to line up much with what the title implies. So really making sure that the content and the title clearly tie into one another and describe what's actually happening in the session is important. It needs to be well written. We want to understand and have a good vision of what you're intending to do, not just from the content perspective, the presentation style, but also how are you going to interact with those who are attending? What takeaways are they going to be, can they expect? What goals, what are your goals for sharing this information with the online learning community? The next piece is the relevance to the conference. This ties in with the theme and applicability and understanding your audience. When you've taken all of that into consideration, is the content that you're reviewing relevant to what the Accelerate conference is trying to achieve? Is it going to contribute to the knowledge share at the conference? We certainly have a lot of different conferences and webinar opportunities that OLC provides to us. And Accelerate is really the culmination of all of it. So really looking at how you can narrow in on the relevance to what we're trying to achieve, understanding our history, looking forward and being forward thinking about where we need to go as we continue to impact the world of online higher education. Third is audience appeal. Is there something about this topic that would attract the audience and benefit the conference? Is it going to have good outcomes? Is it designed to be interactive? Just keep in mind, we keep hitting on this interactive, all of us do. Is it going to engage it? Is there hands-on session? Is there hands-on activity in the workshop? I know that Megan mentioned that a little bit earlier. You know, there is a certain level of expectation that different session types will kind of ignite in attendees. So making sure that you're hitting those components is really important. We've mentioned interactivity already. Is there a note? And when we say interactivity, we want to see what you really plan to do. Spell it out as much as possible. Provide examples of what is going to happen, what takeaways you might be providing. Are there any deliverables? Is it going to be a question and answer? Is it going to, what tools or technologies might you be using? Really making sure that you hit on this is important. And does it meet the session criteria? This is what Megan just discussed, making sure that the content is aligning with that session criteria. When you're submitting for a panel discussion, make sure there's more than one presenter. If it is a workshop, definitely want to have some type of hands-on interactivity. If it's a research proposal, make sure that it includes your references and things of that nature. So really going back to what Megan was talking about. And then finally, which one of the things that I think is very important, OLC has their 5 elements of effective practice. So not that you get bonus points, but I think it's always good to tie your proposal and making sure that your proposal is following those 5 elements of effective practice. Just as a reminder, those are innovation, replicability, impact, evidence, and scope. And again, you can find that at the Online Learning Consortium's website. Now, these are the topics and the areas of relevance. And what happens is the reviewers will go through and they will review each of these criteria on a rating scale from 1 to 5, with five being exceptional and 1 being pretty poor, not one that we would recommend. So scale of 1 to 5 on all those, on those variety of 6 different topics is how the rubric runs and how we will what we will use to determine what proposals kind of rise to the top. Now, again, I mentioned interactivity, and we've all mentioned it, so I'm going to hit on it one more time here. And what we've done is we've provided some examples of how some other successful proposals of the past have mentioned and or referenced interactivity within proposals. So as you can see, you've got, it's a game show that there's attendees can pose challenges or questions. The panelists compete to provide the answers, and the winner of the game gets a special prize. It's very clear what interaction is going to happen between the individuals presenting the information as well as those attendees. We've got 5 minutes of reflection, Q&A discussion groups, using poll everywhere, capturing audience responses, exercises with attendees. I was like, I don't know if that was like physical exercises, but either way, it's still interactive. And finally, we have the structure. This one is much more, 1 through 5, and you're talking about conversations, reflections, and discussions. So again, interactivity is a real big key from my own personal experience. There's a lot of times where I will see these excellent proposals, and there's definitely some valid knowledge to be shared, but without the mention of how they plan to make it engaging and exciting for the attendees, it will sometimes and very often be the difference maker for me in terms of whether it is a moderate proposal or a really high ranking one. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christine, Katie, and she is going to follow up and talk to you about how the actual three-tiered review process works.
Thank you, Tracy. Before I go into the three-tiered review structure, I also wanted to just make a note to add on to what you were saying about the effective practices question that the reviewers are asked to answer. While we definitely think that it is a great idea to keep those in mind in your submission proposal and that process, I just wanted to let you know that those are not actually weighted in the scores of the reviewers. So that is a way for you to kind of check and make sure that you're looking at those things, but that also another way for us to see, hey, are there some effective practices that can come out of these proposals? So I just wanted to add that additional clarification on there. So with that being said, I would like to talk to you about the review process and the three-tiered review structure. And it's something that I think that not a lot of people who are submitting proposals actually understand the rigorous review process that these proposals go through. And then I will also just mention something about the selection process, acceptance rates, and the items of that nature as we go through. So this is kind of an illustration of the three-tiered review process. And after you hit submit, and all proposals are considered final after the close of the CFP. Until that 11:59 p.m. on May 22nd, you can go in and edit and update your proposal as often as you would like or you need to. But once that CFP deadline passes, all proposals are considered final. So once that date passes, we will be able to start our first phase of the review process, which is the double-blind peer review phase. And I just want to reiterate that this phase is double-blind, and you'll want to make sure in your proposal that you are trying to keep things as blind as possible. So we do not recommend that you include presenter names in your abstracts because that removes that blind element. We also recommend making sure that if you are submitting research on behalf of an institution, that you don't include that specific institutional name in your proposal as well. If you are accepted, you can always go back later and update your abstracts to include that information. So this double-blind peer review process, it takes place for about 2 weeks, and we have a stable of about 150 reviewers, and everybody's assigned, a number of reviews, and they go through and they score everything based on that rubric that Tracy outlined previously. And once that review period has passed, is closed, then we go to the second phase of the review process. And that is where the track chairs make their reviews, and they'll look at all the information that was submitted by those reviewers and those ratings based on the rubric. And they will also make recommendations of which proposals should be slotted into which category for acceptance, or as an alternate, or as to be declined. Once the track chairs have finished their review and recommendations, we move to the third phase of the review process. And that is where the program and conference chairs review the track chair recommendations. So, like I said, it's a very rigorous 3-tiered review process. It does include that double-blind component, and that is how those decisions get made. It's kind of a sneak peek into the background workings of how these decisions get made. I just wanted to answer also Michelle's question that she put in the chat, because I think it's a really good one and that I want to make sure that people are clear on. She asks about, before the due date, if you hit submit, can you go back and in to edit and review and then resubmit? And the answer to that is yes, you can. So if you go in today after this webinar and submit something, you would have that opportunity up until the CFP deadline to go back in. You would log back into the OLC conference management system and go to your sessions or your submissions and click on edit next to the one that you've submitted. Then you can make any changes that you want to make, and then click save, and it'll save those changes that you've made. Once 11:59 on May 22nd passes, everything is considered final. All submissions do go through all 3 steps of the review, yes. So, and I would definitely, Mimi is also asking in the Q&A if we would consider the review process peer reviewed, and it absolutely, that first tier is the 2 to 3 week review process where we have 150 of your peers review all of the proposals that are submitted. So it's absolutely peer reviewed. And now I want to turn a little bit to the selection process and how many, what percentage of things are selected and how that process works, to give you a little bit of clarity there. The acceptance rate is typically around 45 to 50%. And that does include the number of proposals that we accept as alternates. So if you have been to one of the OLC conferences before, you may have visited some of the discovery sessions at Accelerate, or they're called emerging ideas sessions at Innovate. And those are the sessions that are kind of a more one-to-one or one-to-small group presentations that they're like about 12 of them that take place in one large foyer area or one large room. So because we have 12 of those at every single one of the concurrent sessions, and we'll have 10 to 11 concurrent sessions, those presentations actually enable us to accept a far greater number of submission proposals than we would be able to otherwise. So that is what brings our acceptance rate up to about that 45% to 50% mark. And also, so you may submit for an education session and then be accepted for a discovery session. That basically means that you are being given an alternate slot as a discovery session, and you're on the wait list for an education session. So that's how that works, and why we're able to accept several, probably 100 to 150 more proposals than we would be able to accept otherwise. I also wanted to, there were a couple questions that I think we answered in the chat, but just for everyone's information, how the breakdown of which sessions get allotted to which tracks and which session types is based on the number of, or the percentage of submissions received in those areas. For example, if the leadership track receives 12% of the total submissions, they would receive about 12% of the available slots in the conference program. The same thing with the session types. So if we receive 25% of the session types received are gamified sessions, the new session type, then we would allot approximately 25% of those slots available to that session type. And I'm just throwing numbers out there because at this point, we don't know how many proposals we will receive total. We don't know. I mean, I can give you an estimate to what we hope to receive. But we don't know what the track breakdown will look like exactly. We don't know exactly what the session type breakdown will look like either. So that's why we base it on percentages. So, and that being said, I also wanted to make sure to share with you that if there is a topic that you would like to see represented in the program, then I really encourage you to submit on that topic. We occasionally get feedback like, oh, hey, why wasn't this topic represented? Well, either that something on that topic wasn't submitted or the submissions on that topic were not rated high enough to be accepted. So those topics that are represented in the program are representative of what was submitted. And there were a couple other questions. Samuel, yes, we would recommend that you don't list your institution name in the abstract to keep it double blind. So I think I've answered most of the questions, but anything else I can answer in the chat. And I'd like to turn things back over to, I think Doug.
It is me, Katie. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about, well, we've already heard an awful lot about the criteria and the rubric used in the review process. And of course, we've also discussed the importance of aligning your proposal with the correct track and session type. But to put a bit of a punctuation mark on all of this, I also just wanted to take an opportunity in summary to emphasize just a couple of other key things. And then, of course, that your proposal, it's well written, it's clear, and it's comprehensive. Of course, that will make a big difference in terms of whether or not it is accepted. But then also that it engages the participants with the interactive elements that we've been highlighting. So be sure to include those in your proposal as well, and be specific about how you plan on doing that in your presentation. And then one last point is, sometimes we see during the conference and get feedback that from the attendees that the title and the abstract that's posted on the conference website, so in other words, the title and abstract that was submitted in the proposal process and was accepted, didn't actually in the end reflect the actual presentation. So as you're thinking ahead during this process, as you're writing your proposals for presentation, thinking ahead, assuming you'll be accepted for presentation at the conference, that I would recommend that you actually even put some thought into how you would present this material at the conference when you're writing your proposal. At least for me, when I submit a proposal for presentation, that really helps me ensure that I'm describing in my proposal exactly what it is that I intend to present. And it also helps ensure that that alignment is there. And then we have awards. So of course, in the review process, you've heard about that 3-tiered process. And part of that is selecting a Best in Track award. Each track in the conference has their own award for one presentation in that track that we feel is the best. And sometimes, and I should say, not sometimes, most of the time, it's very, very difficult to actually select which one is the best. But we managed to do it. And I think this is a great benefit for a number of reasons, but for you as the presenter, there are some specific benefits and perks that I would point out, and maybe this will provide you with a little bit of motivation when you're drafting your proposals. One is that presenters receive an award at the conference ceremony in recognition of your proposal. And then presentations are promoted in the conference program. So they're denoted with that icon above. I think it's an award cup. And also via press releases and other social media promoting the conference. And we've also, of course, noticed that, because they're promoted, because they're really worthwhile topics, that they're among the most popular sessions at the conference. And then in that regard, also available to the virtual attendees as well as live stream sessions. So I think with all of this and with this award and that recognition, you'll also just, gain a really, a lot of professional exposure by receiving this recognition. And we hope that that will also provide you with a little bit of lift in your career as well and your accolades. So wanted to point out that that award is available. So Megan, I think you have the next slide.
Thank you. I'm going to bring us home with the last two resources that are going to be available for you to help you with the proposal drafting process. And so the first one that I'm going to talk about is the proposal planning template. So this is a resource that we've developed for you. We sat down and went through the conference management system and pulled every single piece of information that you're going to have to provide a response to in that system. And we put it here in this document. This is just a screenshot of the document, but I think Katie or Christina is going to be posting the actual link to the template in the chat box. But this, what we've done is we've provided you with as many details and tips as we can in this document to help you reach the goal of drafting a good proposal. So I suggest you go in and check it out. The one thing that I will mention is that this is a Google Doc. And so if you decide that you would like to take advantage of this proposal planning template, please make a copy of it so that everyone can share in using this resource. And make sure that you save that copy to your a space on your own drive instead of just saving it back in the OLC files. And then the last resource that I'm going to talk to you about is a sort of limited opportunity. It is a proposal pre-review. This is something that we are piloting this year. So it's with a pilot, it's going to be small scale. There are only 10 slots available for this. And it is on a first come, first served basis. What the proposal pre-review is as an opportunity for you to use that proposal planning template that I was just showing you, go ahead and draft your proposal and then submit the link to this form. Once we receive those 10 proposals, we will then sit down and review them and provide you with detailed feedback on how you can improve your proposal draft for the actual submission. Now, the one thing that I will say is that this is not a guarantee that your proposal will get accepted. This is simply an opportunity for you to gain additional feedback. Our hope is that we will provide you with good information and that you will get accepted. But again, there's no guarantees because there are, as Katie mentioned before, the acceptance rate is about 50 or 45 to 50%. So it is highly competitive. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dorothy and she's going to wrap things up.
All right, I have myself unmuted, so we're good to go. We wanted to know if there's any other questions that haven't been answered in the chat or in the Q&A that we can address right now. And it looks like there's one from Courtney about, will this Google Doc close after the 10 submissions have been received? And Megan, if I'm correct, is that Google Doc going to close or is it going to be there for their personal use?
The Google Doc, the planning template, will be there long term. The form where you can actually submit for the pre-reviews will close immediately after the 10th submission.
There's also a question about when it will start, like when does that open?
It's open right now. And I believe Katie posted it to the Presenter Services webpage. So if we can put that link in the chat box?
Yep, I already did.
Perfect.
So it's on that presenter services page. I'll put the link in again. And all those resources that Megan referred to are on that page. The planning template, the planning example, and the proposal pre-review form.
And Laura has a question about what is the main audience or group attending at the OLC conference? Admin, faculty, instructional designers. Maybe Christine or Katie, do you guys have an idea as to the largest group?
So that is a great question, and we have seen some fluctuations in the answer to that over the past few years. And we do have representatives who attend the conference from all of those areas, you know, administrators, instructional designers, even students, training professionals from the corporate arena, instructional technologists, researchers. I would say that this is a non-answer answer, but the largest growing sector of attendees right now is in that instructional designer and instructional technologist area, but we do have representatives from all of the areas that attend the conference.
Thank you. Then LaShawn has a question. Is it safe to assume that most of the attendees will have a laptop or tablet, etc., for planning that interactivity? And LaShawn, I can answer that. I see just about every person in a session having one of those with them.
Right. We definitely advertise that every session is bring your own device. And just as a note to presenters, all presenters must bring their own laptop to present from as well, or whatever. We don't provide those, so keep that in mind too. I think there's also a question from Megan that on some good resources on gamified session design. Does anybody here have a good answer for her?
Well, I can tell you there's going to be a presenter services guide coming out for gamified sessions very shortly. And Randy, if you want to force folks to make a copy of the Google Doc, just change the URL at the end and replace it with edit with copy. What a great suggestion. Thank you very much. And Monique, can we use tools like Kahoot? I have seen that used before, and it's quite interactive. There's an amazing amount of competitive people in the audience. And is there any other questions there by anybody?
Well, this is Christine. We will hang around for a few minutes to answer any questions that you have, including questions on the conference in general. We'll continue to watch the chat, or feel free to take the mic too. Dorothy, do you want to wrap things up?
Yeah, as a quick reminder for everybody, the call for proposals is open now and closes on May 22nd. And I just want to thank everybody for coming today. It's very exciting to see so many people with the questions, and I'm glad that we can help you before you submit your proposals. Thank you so much for coming.